Because that's what it looks like, and that's what it should look like. So I'm just making a few platforms here that we can see what different things look like. Yeah, so we can have stuff that you're running along that looks pretty good. If it's super flat, if it's just perfectly flat, it looks kind of bad. It's interesting, there's some artifacting there around his normals where some of his normals are allowing the light to reflect on him kind of oddly. Is that the scattering effect? Oh, interesting. So there's even more crazy stuff that you can do. Controls how accurate self-shadowing the whole scene shadows of this light are. At 0, shadows will start at the center caster surface. Interesting. So if this goes to 1, you can see the feet are all the way away from it, but the rest of it looks good. And if it's at 0, the shadows connect straight up to the feet properly, but the rest of it looks really weird. And with 1, it's just like, boom. I don't have to worry about a lot of the shadow stuff. It just looks like it's not going to have any of that weird flickering effects. So what is this? This is... At 0, shadows will start at the caster surface, but there will be many self-shadowing artifacts. Larger value shadows will start further from their casters. There won't be self-shadowing artifacts, but objects might appear to fly. Around 0.5 seems to be a good trade-off. This also affects the soft transition of shadows. Interesting. So what's happening is these guys are doing self-shadowing or something? Oh, these floors have some weird settings on them. Yeah, so these self-shadowing are causing issues on themselves. So let's see, is there some sort of self-shadow? Self-shadow only? No. Bar shadow. Dynamic inset, hidden shadow, shadow two-sided. Yeah, the self-shadowing stuff seems to really mess up a lot of these calculations. Assumed to be enabled if, alright, let's see, hidden shadow. Light is if static, light attachments is group, indirect. So what can we do about this odd effect that we have where this is just kind of messing up? And it has to do with this light. I mean, it's basically there regardless of whatever we do. Yeah, I guess I'm just not very happy with how these self-shadowed objects are just... When they're like that, they don't look good at all. And maybe it's just these planes or something that has to do with that, but... Like if these objects... Let me just turn off casting shadows on them. It's going to be real odd. I wonder how that would actually look. I mean, if we're running along the ground, we can definitely have things that are in the foreground not cast shadows on stuff. Like, that's fine. Well, it's very clear that the light direction vector during the day needs to be different. So let's write that down real quick. It needs to be higher in the sky. So let's figure some other stuff out. Why does the grass look like it does? Like, I'd expect the grass to look like that. Not these weird tip things. So let's take a look at what could be causing all that. So let's see, we want to take our light and we want to see why things are looking the way they are. Is it because they're casting shadows on each other? So we're getting all these big shadow maps from these things? So let's take a look at our... Well, the thing is we only have the tips showing, which is not what we want. Like, we should be seeing all the grass all the time. And I think we're using this test grass. Which grass are we using? It's this test grass material. And that's what's going into this, is this grass here, which is landscape. It's just test grass. So it's this guy. So if we go to that grass mesh, this is the material. It's got cast shadow and enable collision on for LOD settings. But in this material, how is it actually, what material is it going to use for this mesh? Yeah, if we turn off cast shadows, alright, so it's definitely cast shadows. is doing something in here. Let's see. Far shadows, lighting channels, static shadows. Alright, so the landscape isn't really affecting any of this stuff. It's going to be... Alright, there's two different types of grass in here, so I need both of the pieces of grass. So if we remove the shadow from the grass, it looks like that. Which not only performs much better, it looks like it works a little better too. So let's try lowering the light a bit, see how that looks. Yeah, I'm much more of a fan of this. Now the question is, why are these things inside of here not responding to the shadow map? It's like only some of the grass is responding to the shadow map? It's like, you know, looks proper from that angle, but then we've got these tips which should be in shadow but are not in shadow. So what I'm going to do is, what I want is to kind of lock down this grass stuff in here because Adam was messing around with it. And as a result, I've got different types of grass than I want, and I don't want him changing stuff. So I need to snag some grass myself here. So I'm gonna copy a new grass thing over here. I'm gonna call this Unshadowed Grass 1. Yeah, it's just one of those things, Scarecam. We don't need the grass casting shadows. Like, that's just kind of silly. I think it's just a bunch of unnecessary work, to be honest. We shouldn't need all that. We don't need collision. We don't need shadows. You know, like, unless we're baking stuff in there for all this, which might be the thing, then casting shadows is just not what we want at runtime for these things. So our test grass, we are going to basically redo this. So unshadowed grass, lighting channels, receives decals, everything is going to be properly set up here. So make sure to save that. Alright, so is there any sort of, let's just make sure our light map resolution is just default. We don't want any advanced stuff going on inside of this. Auto generate collision, we don't need collision. Alright, so if we save this grass, we only have one type of grass here. It's just the one. But we still have all of these issues here with the tips of these grass not being in shadow. So is there anything else in here with these sorts of things? I don't know what any of your words mean, Karakan. I don't know any of it. Destination light map index, source light map, min light map resolution, like, yeah, we don't. Generate light map UVs, high precision, reverse adjacency, removes degenerates, recompute normals. Maybe what I need to do is rebuild the lighting, so let's just go ahead and build and see if that does anything for us. Well, there is subsurface scattering on stuff in Unreal. I'm not really sure how it works, so I'm not going to say that I understand how it works. I'm just going to say it exists because the manual says it exists, so obviously it exists if somebody was paid to write about it, right? Like, nobody would have a feature in the engine that doesn't actually work and say it works. I mean, who would do that? So obviously we still are having these problems, and it looks like it's with any shadow, like even Bitey casting a shadow onto the grass. Isn't actually working properly on these pieces, on these meshes. Like, they're working on some of them, but they're not working on the whole mesh for the object. Like, it looks like it works on half of the things. So, why would that be? What? Is there something with this object, this mesh, which is just all sorts of screwed up, maybe? Maybe there's grass that... Let's see, where are the verts? What the hell? a lot of verts for this thing. I have a feeling that there's something with this specific grass mesh or something like that which is causing it to have odd normals, and that it's actually something on this object which is causing it to be all weird town on us. So what I'm gonna try to do, instead of having this grass here, what I think I'm gonna try is throwing something else on here for grass. So let's grab like a different mesh. Let's just throw like a whole bunch of capsules. Look at that. That is ridiculous. But yeah, as we can see very clearly, the shadows are working properly when we have like now, is it working properly? Let's mess with our test grass here. Let's see, scaling, why don't we do 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2. Yeah, we can definitely see that the shadows are hard shadows, and that there's something wrong with the mesh that we're using for the grass, which is causing its lighting to be all sorts of jacked up. Because our tiny capsules look yeah, bubble garden grass. Our bubbles look proper. So we don't. Obviously, we're doing something else wrong. It just looks ridiculous. So I'm just gonna slap a I'm gonna copy this cone over into my landscape and just have a like simple cone grass. So we'll have unshadowed pyramid. Alright, looking a lot better. Uniform scaling. Alright. So let's mess with our unshadowed pyramid. Let's see. Cast shadow false, enable collision false. And let's save that. So unshadowed looks like that. And the performance jumps way up when this is not shadowed. Which is what we want. So is there anything in here? Like material slot is 0 in basic wall, so perhaps the material slot we need to actually do something with? Is there anything we can do with? Like these are material slots for the grass right here, so like that's the material. And this is, the shading model is subsurface. And we've got like masked blend mode with a surface, so this material has some lighting on it. And it's two-sided. It's probably that the two-sided thing is messing it up. Anyway, I'm going to be right back. Quick bio break, and we're going to figure out why the tips of those grass were all messed up. The reason we put the pyramids in there was just to make sure, you know, we had something to go off of. Yeah, see, Adam's been messing with subsurface color stuff. I don't know what all that does. Let's see, it says, allows you to add color to your material to simulate shifts in color when light passes through the surface. Well, that's probably what's messing up some of our lights. But we can always test that theory, because that's what people do, right? And I'm going to mess around with my overlay real quick here, because that's always a great idea to do live, right? So happy 4th of July, everybody, because it's America's birthday. We got to celebrate that. So let's do so. What is a tangent space normal? That is a normal. That is in tangent space, obviously. I think it has a lot to do with lighting effects that happen. You can do effects that are basically tangent to the normal, and I think it has a lot to do with ambient occlusion mapping and other mapping that moves the pixel around. So based on the tangent, you can move off of a surface and light it at the proper things, at the proper angles and all that. So awesome. All right. So I'm going to take a look at this texture real quick and see if there's anything that, yeah, there's nothing real complicated going on. We basically got these multiply, yeah, we have a world position offset for our pixel, which we're going to change, which is based on our wind. We have a roughness for our reflectiveness, and we have a color, which we're multiplying in there. And that's pretty much it. So it doesn't do much craziness, but it may be that the shading model and that this is two-sided. Maybe the two-sidedness of the object is messing up everything else. So we'll have to take a look at that. Leaving out the tips. The opacity mask. The opacity mask is going to be from the sample texture. So this texture definitely is not missing stuff in the opacity. So it should be fine. If the opacity mask it's a mask, right? So it's either working or it's not working. So either we would see big blocks of nothingness out there, or whatever. So it's not going to be that. It's going to be something else. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to duplicate this grass material here into our test grass, which I don't have on the screen. So let's start messing with this thing. So we've got our test grass material. I already have one. Test grass mesh. Test grass mesh material. Test grass material. Alright, and we'll pop that open. inside of here, we'll just drag this up. Alright, so the slot name should just be like, the slot name is stupid. We're just going to call it material. Material slot name primary, because we can. Cast shadow, enable collision. Alright, cool. That looks like what it should. So we're going to go to our test grass, and we're going to set our mesh back to the grass mesh, and also set it to the actual grass, such as that. So let's start messing with it. So why don't we try shading the, so let's see, the shading model, do we have a description of it? Let's just make it not two-sided. I know it looks like crap, but let's apply it. And compile all the shaders. And obviously the two-sidedness is not what is causing this issue. So we're going to reapply the two-sidedness. We are going to try changing this to a, like, mask blend mode should be fine. But let's just change its shading model to default lit and see if that does anything. When in doubt, just mess around. Alright, so it looks very clear that it is the shading model, the default lit shading model, which is failing us. Because we look at it from this side, looks good. Look at it from this side, looks good. Like it shouldn't be shaded at all. So the subsurface color stuff is, subsurface shading is what's going to cause all of our problems. Yeah, good rule. When you don't know what you're doing, just start flipping stuff on and off. With 20 questions, you can get any animal, right? With 20 switches and turning crap on and off, you can find where the hell the zoom button is in Harmony or in Unreal. And that's what we're supposed to have. We're not supposed to have any color on this side of our objects because there isn't any color for our objects. So good. That's what should be happening. Alright, so things to write down. Well, let's see. Maybe we should understand why the subsurface scattering, the subsurface shading model does what it does. So let's look it up. Subsurface shading model Unreal. Alright, so materials have a new subsurface shading model which is intended for materials like wax or jade which appear opaque but lighting scatters inside them, allowing a portion of light from the opposite side to show through. So if you're a blade of grass, basically it's going to let you, it's going to let light come through the grass, which probably would work real well for lots of grass in a row that's casting shadows on themselves because they're not going to completely block the light. So it's used for creating realistic skin for humans and other creatures. The effect from the shading model is lower quality and cheaper than what should usually be used for it. The wraparound dot in and light backscattering term, which shows up so. Be sure to set the opacity for a surface material to a reasonable value. Point light shadowing does not yet support it. Cascaded shadow map seams. Subsurface scattering materials may receive leakage lighting through fully opaque materials that they're close to the shadow caster. Soft shadows with low opacity are limited in how soft. Alright, so basically, limitations, shadows are screwed. Which basically means we can't use it. Which sucks. So it'd be something really cool for like a fully outdoorsy sort of thing, but if we want grass at night, or with any sort of shadowing, we're toast. So subsurface won't work for stuff because shadows are not fully supported. Alright, I'll write that down. Subsurface lighting doesn't play well with shadows. There we go. That's what makes your ears glow red. That's true. Alright, cool. So let's see. Is there anything else we should mess around with on this thing while we're here? I don't think so. Of course, we've got this ridiculously reflective landscape. Let's just make the ground super reflective. Oh man, the moon is reflected. We're running through a marsh. It's a chrome floor. Well, it's got the reflection on it. So if we mess around with the skybox, change our time of day. So we can change the height angle on the moon. So now it's like really high in the sky. And why is everything green? Is it because of the green grass getting somehow reflected into it? Must be. Anyway, the dirt should be matte. We should not have any sort of reflection on the dirt. So let's turn that off. Yeah, so no more shiny floor. Alright, so that's looking much better. So we've got our shadows. That's looking okay. Let's see, the light intensity is just way too high at the moment, so let's turn it down. Something reasonable. If we had like a, whoops. If we had like a 2, what does that look like? This is specifically for just like the moonlight. So a 2 looks, it's actually not that much. Yeah, a 4 looks pretty decent. Alright, so I'm trying to get some boundaries of like how bright the moon should be, and then I'll figure out how bright the sun should be. And we're obviously going to need multiple lights. Like we're going to need a directional light that comes from the moon. But then we need to light the rest of the universe, right? And I need to figure out how to do that too. You know, all the things. Alright, so I need to focus. My mind is all over the place. I'm going to need to have a lighting section here. So we need like a new variable. And let's call this, like we're going to need a float. We're going to be like moonlight. That was a movie, that wasn't it? This here. Alright, this is going to be under lights. So I'm just going to put that at like 4 for default. So we're going to have a light, we're going to have, I should rename this. This is going to be the celestial light. And then we need to have like a world light. And the question is, what sort of light should we actually have? I mean, theoretically, we should be taking the light from the sky and applying it to the scene, right? Something like that. And that's like a skylight, right? So if you drag those actors in there and they do weird things, I just want like a skylight. Yeah. We'll just add that and see how it goes. So SLS captured scene. Yeah, okay, we can do that. So we'll capture the sun and stars and all that. And we'll see what we can do with it. Okay, so we've got our skylight. And it's light color. Okay, so you can see it's barely highlighting, like the mountains are coming up with blue. We can see the trees. We can see some of these. We can see this platform right here. The thing is, I don't want any shadows on this. How come the mountains are lit up so nicely, but the grass isn't? Is it because they're blue? Or have they got something else going on? Like, they're mask lit sprites. Well, that's kind of the thing, is if we use this skylight, it should actually render everything in the scene onto this stuff as light, so like having more clouds would actually make it brighter because the clouds are brighter than the background. Maybe not as, much, but they're there. Alright, so with this skylight, if we have a very intense skylight here, these things just aren't showing up too well. These things are showing up kind of too well. I mean, it's kind of a dark texture to begin with, So maybe that just the grass is too dark for this stuff. It's not really a brilliant green grass. So why don't we just do like we can boost it a little bit. Alright, it's constant vector 4.